Brian Smith here, and welcome to the Dreampath podcast, where I try to get inside the heads of talented creatives from all over the world. My goal is to demystify and humanize the creative process and make it accessible to everyone. Now let's jump in. Jeff Hamilton's on the show today. Jeff is a multi-instrumentalist, audio recording engineer, live audio engineer, tour manager, stage tech, and touring sideman for bands like Uriah, Heap, and DeYoung from Styx. He's also a member of multiple bands, one of which is about to embark on an international tour, with dates in Montreal, Canada, and Moscow, Russia. Jeff played with the Violent Femmes for 10 years, and also served as their producer and audio engineer on their We Can Do Anything album and on their Happy New Year EP. If you grew up in the 80s or even the 90s, you probably remember the Violent Femmes hits Blister in the Sun and Add It Up, which many say defined the early to mid-80s sound and vibe, with a minimalist style of punk rock that really transcended punk and made its way into the musical consciousness of just about every young person from that era. In this interview, we hear how Jeff met the Femmes and was brought in as a touring musician with them, as well as their audio engineer and producer for studio albums. We also hear about Jeff's current band, Beatallica, an internationally acclaimed Metallica Beatles tribute band that really defies explanation in words. Just go to YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Music to hear what this band is all about. They are hilarious, but also super talented and hugely popular around the world. In this interview, Jeff tells the tale of Beatallica's legal confrontation with Sony Music and the unlikely superstar musicians who cheered Beatallica on and helped them prevail in that battle. In addition to this long list of accomplishments, Jeff has also recorded in iconic studios around the world, including Electric Lady in New York City and Brown Bear in Nashville. He is also hired to build recording studios, and in fact built his own amazing studio in Milwaukee called Hamtone Audio. When Jeff is not touring or recording albums, he serves as the audio engineer for the NBA team, the Milwaukee Bucks, and just recently started performing a solo act of original music. Jeff has been all in as a musician and recording engineer since about the age of 12. It was a lot of fun hearing about his journey and how he maintained a foothold in music for so many decades, despite the fact that music is one of those industries that really spits you out if you don't have what it takes, including talent, grit, creativity, and perseverance. So please enjoy this wide-ranging interview with Jeff Hamilton. All right, Jeff Hamilton, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
I'm great. Yeah, thanks for being on the show. We are going to talk about your musical career and your recording career. And to kick things off, I wanted to share my frame of reference for the conversation. I guess my biggest frame of reference is the Violent Femmes. And going back to the early to mid 80s when I first became, I guess I developed a musical consciousness in terms of rock and punk and what was happening in that era, and listened to the Violent Femmes and heard them at my school dances and really appreciated the unique vision they had in terms of taking a very simple approach to musicality and music in terms of like a snare drum and an acoustic bass and just the bare essentials for putting together a band, but then also putting out just radical punk music. And that's my frame of reference. And I know that you've played with the Violent Femmes for many years. And I just wanted to share with you how much I loved that band and still do love them, and deep admiration for anyone who gets the opportunity to play with that kind of band. So well done, Jeff.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So tell us, how did you first meet the band and then be invited to play with them?
Well, everybody's from Milwaukee. So I'm actually from Philadelphia, but we ended up settling in Milwaukee. But the band is from Milwaukee. So they were the big band to come out of Milwaukee, other than a band called the Bodines, which was around at that time as well and still together. And a friend of mine got the position to be their front of house engineer. And they were on tour, and their guitar tech had met a woman in Spain and decided to marry her and stay in Spain. And he's still there to this day, and they had a child and whatnot. And anyways, so my friend recommended that I take the position. And I had actually known Victor DiLorenzo, the drummer, the original drummer, for many years because he had a recording studio here in Milwaukee as well. So I'd known him through that, the music scene here in Milwaukee. And I'd met Brian Ritchie maybe one time in the mid 80s at a show at a bar somewhere, just said hi, that kind of thing. So that's how I got my foot in the door with them.
Nice. And what year was that?
2005.
So tell us about what was going on between the 70s when you grew up and 2005, where you actually started playing with an iconic band like the Violent Femmes.
Well, I got into music. I've always been into it. I have two older brothers, so that helped, like being exposed to all the up and coming stuff in the 70s, which, it was all happening then, these brand new, here's this guy, David Bowie, Led Zeppelin, all these bands coming out, and me and my friends would watch these music programs called Don Krishner's Rock Concert and the Midnight Special. And in addition to that, too, Saturday Night Live came out in that, and they had bands, that was a feature thing as well. So I got exposed to all kinds of amazing music and was always drawn to music, basically, and the guitars, especially. My role in the 70s when we discovered Kiss was as Paul Stanley.
Oh, nice.
When we would dress up and we would have air guitar concerts for the neighborhood, you'd set up in our garage and stuff. So this is, many years before I even had a guitar. So that was just how, I was exposed to all that, and it was just great. And finally got a guitar around 11 or 12 and I started playing and really dedicating myself to that. And like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to be a musician.
What was your first guitar?
It was a Hagstrom 1, I think it was called, or Hagstrom 2, which was a really, really cheap guitar, probably cost maybe $75 or $100 then. And I ended up, unfortunately, in my punk years of angst and whatever, I ended up smashing that guitar.
Hey, well done.
Yeah, one of a couple that I did, which is very liberating. Thank you, Jimi Hendrix, for putting that into my head. Now I regret it, because there's this iconic picture of David Bowie with the eye patch when he was Ziggy,
Uh-huh.
and he's holding this red guitar, and that's the exact same guitar that my first guitar. So I was like, I wish I wasn't an idiot kid and smashed that guitar. So.
Oh, man. Yeah. Hagstrom. I never heard of a Hagstrom. Is that just like, did they die out in the 80s or something?
No, they're still around. It's a Swedish company that's been around forever, since the 50s, I think. And yeah, they still make guitars, and they're actually really good quality, mid-budget stuff, And it's just, ironically, I was just recently looking on Reverb and eBay and all that for that guitar, thinking, I should find that and just buy another one just so I can say this is the first,
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're going for like $1,000 now.
No way.
Yep. And it's all because of that picture of David Bowie, which I'll send it to you. I'll send you that picture, and you'll be like, "Oh, I've seen that picture."
Oh, I'd love to see it. Yeah, I'd love to see it. So your two older brothers were musicians, and your parents, I assume, were pretty supportive of this I guess, effort to become rock stars.
Yeah, my mother comes from a musical family. She had played piano and singing in the church and all that type of stuff. And my father, he has no musical thing whatsoever, but he was always a fan of it. He turned me on to like Janis Joplin and Jim Croce and all that. And my mom turned me on to Heart and Neil Young, as these bands were coming out and these artists were coming out,
She sounds like a cool lady.
Oh, yeah, she's great. Paula Jean.
Nice.
Yeah. Hey, Mom. Shout out. And so my mom was always encouraging, it's like great, and we had a full band set up in the basement. We took over the basement, and we'd actually have shows and, parties, and our neighborhood kids would, watch our bands and that when we were younger, before we actually started playing venues and whatnot.
Wow.
So yeah, so that was a great thing, obviously, to have that encouragement, but the flip side of that is like my father and my mother were like, well, if you're going to do this, be serious about it, because it's not an easy gig, as they say.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it sounds like a nice, healthy balance of encouragement, but also caution. And like, hey, if you're going to go down this road, you got to do it right to maximize your chances of success in that space.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And I took it very seriously. And I practiced, 7-8 hours a day, just basically playing the guitar whenever I could. And the neighborhood I grew up was pretty fertile with everybody seemed to play. So that was a cool thing. We could exchange, ideas and, hey, I figured out this song, show me that chord, that kind of thing. So
that's great. So how many instruments did you become familiar with and actually get proficient in your younger years?
Well, I started on guitar. That was my main love. But due to the fact that my oldest brother was a guitar player, just straight up, and my second oldest brother is a drummer, I wanted to fit in and play with them. I'm like, well, play bass, So I ended up playing bass just by default. But a very good friend of mine had also been playing bass for quite some time at that point. His name is Steve Post, and he was in a really popular heavy metal band that lasted a few years. They were on Roadrunner Records called Realm. They actually have a resurgence coming on. They're playing a festival, a big metal festival in Europe coming up in April. But I was familiar with that instrument and I was around it through him. So I just picked up the bass and just so I could be able to fit in, with the gang. So that was probably a year or so after I started playing guitar. So I've been playing both pretty much equally the same amount of time. And that's pretty much all I played for 10, 15 years or something like that. And then a friend of mine gave me a mandolin in the early 90s, and I really fell for that. And there's an artist who lives in New York now, but he was living in Milwaukee at the time, called John Cruth, who's amazing. You should check him out, everybody. And he's a fantastic mandolin player. So I saw him early on, and that influenced me, and we became friends to this day. And he showed me some stuff and whatnot. And then shortly after that, I was playing in a band, and I had produced an artist, and he had this a thing called a lap steel, and it's like, hey, I want a lap steel on a track. Can you play this? And in this business, you just say yes. Yep, I can play it. And just I laid a track down, and he loved it, and he gave me this lap steel as gratitude and payment for the track, which I was floored. As 1939 National that I still
Holy
have.
Smoke.
Yeah. And so then I started playing lap steel a lot more up. And so those are the main instruments that I play that, I have proficiency on, guitar, bass, mandolin, and lap steel. And then just from there, I've played sitar as well. And one of the prerequisites for the Violent Femmes is to be on stage and whatnot. I had to play some kind of horn instrument, which I never have done. And so I decided to try the trumpet, which hey, this is going to be easy, just blow into it, right? But there's this thing called amateur that you have to get to even get a note out of it. And that took me a while to even be able to get a note. But in the meantime, it just sounded like a dying whale and whatnot. And so the Femmes guys got a kick out of it when I would play that. And I was just so bad that they ended up featuring me on some solos in the night just to, listen to how bad this is. And the crowd would go nuts because it was just terrible.
This is punk rock.
Exactly. And that's for the Horns of Dilemma, which is their backing thing. If anybody sees the band, you'll see a group of people in the back, that come up for a few songs, and they just do these atonal jams of, for one of the shows I remember at the Fillmore, we had 23 people playing in the Horns of Dilemma, all various horn instruments and, all kinds of bizarre instruments and whatnot.
And the dilemma at the time was, is Jeff going to get through this song?
Exactly.
Is the audience going to stick around?
The best part about that is they're traveling saxophone players. They would have guys in Europe and America. In America, it was Steve McKay from the Stooges. And so he was a super sweet guy, and he loved it. He's like encouraging me, and I was really bad. We'd play. But then we'd play Europe, and it was Dick Perry, who you would know if you're a Pink Floyd fan. He did all the saxophone on Dark Side of the Moon. And
oh my goodness.
So he was the guy that I'm sitting, and he was just like, oh, this guy's terrible. I can't play. but we got along really well. And he was just, it was hilarious to me that I'm playing next to these iconic, horn players or saxophone players, just.
Yeah.
So super fun.
So you were touring Europe with the Violent Femmes?
Yeah, all over the world actually with them.
And how many years did that last?
They broke up in 2007, then got back together again in 2012 for Coachella, where they did a reunion, and then that ended up being until 2016. And then they kind of changed they slimmed down their world touring and whatnot, and changed managements and stuff, and it ended up I got offers to do other things that were a little bit more lucrative, and I had to eat, so I ended up exiting that, but still worked with them as well in the studio and various shows where, if I'm in the town that they're at or they come to Milwaukee, I'll sit in with them as well. So
yeah.
So we still have a great relationship together. So
right on. So when you're playing with the Femmes, are you in awe of the place that they hold in history? I mean, you grew up in that era, and I imagine because they're from the same town, they were a big part of your musical consciousness and upbringing.
Well, actually, on my end, not really. I knew about them, and I went to a show. I think the only time I had seen them was in 1985 at a festival we have here called Summerfest, which is the largest musical festival in the world. You should come check it out. It's amazing. So anyways, I went to this show. These girls are with, let's go see this band. And we ended up dancing all night, and it was super fun. And that was that. At that time, I was more into progressive rock, jazz, and things like that, So I wasn't this fawning over, oh my God, Violent Femmes.
Yeah.
Which maybe helped for me to be, not awestruck when I was with them. I'm like, Violent Femmes? You guys still around? That's
right.
That's kind of how I looked at it. And I didn't realize the scope of it. And then obviously, touring the world with them and seeing the fanatic cult fan base that they have. And, you're in a foreign country, nobody speaks English, yet they're singing all the words to this song,
Right.
So
yeah,
then I began to realize that, and it's amazing. It's super cool. They have a very unique footprint in the history of music, without being this major U2 type, that type of band. But they're
right. Yeah, they're not an arena type of band, and they never were.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. I mean, there's a cult status that I think that they still hold, and it's interesting how that works because you're in a band called Beatallica, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and it seems like, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but it seems like in Europe there are fan bases that really get into niche type of bands that don't make it big in America. But I'm thinking of like one of the classic documentaries of the last decade was Anvil. I don't know if you ever saw Anvil, but
I had them at the club that I book here in town.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Recently.
And I remember seeing that documentary, and of course I had not really heard of them when I was watching the documentary, but I see just how nuts the fans go. And it was at Japan
mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of bands like that just have these huge fan bases outside the US.
Yep.
And it sounds like the Violent Femmes really took advantage of that.
Yeah, and their first platinum records were in New Zealand and Australia. They were open arms welcomed in Australia. Just they're worshipped over there. And Brian Ritchie ended up moving to Tasmania, so he's there now and has been for quite a few years. So that was one of the stops, on our tours. We would do Australia around this time of year. And what was great for me is my father and my stepmother moved to Australia in the early 80s, and I had never been there until the Femmes hired me. Like, we're going to Australia. Like, oh, I'm going to go see my dad I haven't seen forever. And he had came out to a show that was in Brisbane where they live, and we're playing, and I'm featured on a bunch of, backing instruments and some solos and whatnot throughout the night. And he was just astounded. He didn't know, he had never seen me play. My parents were divorced since the early 70s. He knew I played, but he never actually saw me perform. So that was a really cool thing for me, to be able to, go to this and see my father and connect with my father. And it was all through music.
Yeah.
So
that's fantastic. And you get to travel the world
mm-hmm.
and see places that you would never otherwise see.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things when I was younger is I didn't want to go anywhere. I made this pact. I don't want to go to New York City unless I'm going there with a band when I'm playing. And I didn't want to go to LA unless I was going there with a band playing or producing a record or something like that. And all of that happened. So that's really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, I sort of made that pact about the Sundance Film Festival. I went there one time, long time ago. And it's like, you know what? I don't want to come back here unless I'm invited. I want to be part of this. I want to be part of the filmmaking community. And that never happened. So I just went back as a ticket buyer several more times. And then just recently I got invited to be part of the press there. So,
oh, fantastic.
Yeah, this is my first time going in January with press credentials.
Oh, right on.
Yeah. So I'll be on the red carpet. And,
scoot past the lines.
Yeah. It's very, very exciting. But the Violent Femmes work, it sounds like, ended in about 2016, but then you recorded with them as well, right?
Yeah, well, my touring part of it ended. Yeah. So, but in the couple months of that was over the summer, and we did a bunch of touring then. And then shortly after that, they called me up to do some recording with them in New York. And we went to Electric Lady and did a live broadcast from Jimi Hendrix's studio, which was another incredible moment for all of us, obviously just being in that space, playing and recording. And then I ended up recording some tracks with them at what was known as the Power Station in New York, which cranked out every album you know in the 80s, Dire Straits, Money for Nothing, all that stuff, Sting. So yet another amazing studio that I got to record with them. And then shortly after that was been early 2017. They asked me to be their front of house engineer for the Australian tour. So it's kind of a bizarre thing. I started out as a guitar tech and ended up playing with them, producing their records. Then I was the front of house engineer.
What is the front of house engineer?
The guy who mixes the band live.
Oh, okay.
So the live sound. Yep.
Nice.
Yeah. So I don't really know anybody else that has that. I haven't met anybody else that has that same type of, it's kind of a bizarre.
That's a neat trajectory.
Yeah.
And it's really what's so cool. And I've looked at your bio on your website, which is hamtoneaudio.com, right?
Yes.
And you have the most eclectic job history and it's all music related.
Yep.
But in terms of like playing in bands and recording, and also being in charge of you're the audio engineer for the Milwaukee Bucks, and you're just doing all of these things that are sound, recording, and music related. When you were 12 years old and you're picking up that Hagstrom guitar and you're listening to your older brothers play, did you envision that you would be where you are today and that you would have had that trajectory?
No, not at that time, because I simply wanted to be a guitar player in a rock and roll band, famous, all that young type of thinking. I wanted to be good, but I also wanted to be successful on guitar. And just from utilitarian's aspect, I got into recording because I never thought, okay, I'm going to start studying recording. It really didn't exist back then. There was the only magazine that was called Mix Magazine. It was very high end, but there were no like recording programs, like there is today. There wasn't Full Sail recording or any of that stuff. But I never actually even thought about that as a career or anything. To me, it was simply, okay, we wrote this song. Now we want to record it. So the way I went about that is I had a boombox, which was a cassette-based thing with speakers that you carried around for all the younger listeners.
Nice.
Which I carried
feel old now.
Yeah, which I carried around with me all the time in school and playing music, and those days, people had those. But anyways, I would just set up this boombox in front of us and the band in the basement, and we'd play the song. And then I started thinking, well, I want to put a guitar solo. How do I do that? Like light bulb went off. Well, I'll just get another boombox, put that at the other end of the room, turn up what we just recorded from boombox 1, crank it up really loud, put an amp in the middle of the two boomboxes, hit record on the new boombox 2, and then hit play on the first one, and then play along, do my solo. And that was like primitive overdubbing.
Yeah.
And, and that's how I did that for a while. And then a kid down the block actually got a 4-track cassette recorder, which when they started to become a little bit more, available to consumers and whatnot. And then I just delved into that. I would borrow that from him, and start recording the band, and we had multi-track. We could do 4 tracks. Oh my God, it's like the Beatles. And I learned all kinds of techniques doing stuff on that 4-track. And I bought one of myself several years after that. And then what happened was bands around the neighborhood, hey, can you record me, my band? So I would just do that. And even then, it was never even a thought. To me, it was just like part of the whole package. You played instruments, well, you got to record. So it's the same, you just deal with it.
Yeah.
And then a band that I was in the early 90s called True Heart Susie, which was very popular around here in Milwaukee and regionally. And we had we were at the desk of Violent Records and all that stuff. Didn't get the deal, but anyways, we went in to record at a studio here in town and called Cornerstone Recording, which was one of the only places in town at the time. And the engineer, I was very particular at what I wanted to hear and how to go about it. And the engineer after the session's like, you're really into this. Do you want a job doing this? And I'm like, wow, yeah. So that was my introduction into an actual commercial recording studio. And I haven't looked back since. I've had a studio ever since.
Nice. So it sounds like really kind of an organic journey to becoming a recording engineer, because it's not like you're like, you know what, when I grow up, I want to be a recording engineer. It was more like, well, I want to be a badass musician and I want to play in bands and I want to have a body of work. And in order to do that, I need to learn how to record.
Exactly. And then that actually, and the production side of it to me is the same type of thing. It's like I never set out, I want to be a producer. The only reason I call myself as a producer is because someone in the band that I'm recording says, did that sound good? So they're actually asking my opinion. And then that would lead to, well, yeah, I think it would sound better if you change this chorus, change that lyric, so now I'm a producer. And then what ended up happening in about the mid 90s of these bands at that particular studio, it was, Milwaukee's a very vibrant music scene here. That's incredible original music scene. So I'm recording these bands and they were like, wow, we really like how the record sounds. Can you come out and mix us live? And I'm just like, I've never done that at all, other than with the bands when I was growing up, we had these primitive PAs and I would end up setting that up and turning on the microphones and whatnot. Once again, never thinking I'm going to be a live sound engineer.
Right.
It's just, once again, it's part of this is what you do because, the people have to hear us loud. So we have to have a PA. And, so then that led to me getting into the live sound end of things. And thus, here I am doing, for the Bucks and Marquette and various bands and the Violent Femmes. I've, toured with them doing front of house and many, many other bands.
As you may have noticed, there are great resources and advice mentioned in all our episodes. And for many of them, we actually collect all of these resources for you in one easy place, our newsletter. You can go to dreampathpod.com/newsletter to join. It's not fancy, just an email about each week's episode, featured artists, and resources to help you on your journey. Thanks. And now back to the interview. So tell us about Beatallica.
Beatallica, wow. You should all go and look at the Wikipedia page because it's a very crazy, wild story. So they're friends of mine. The band's been around since 99 or something, 2000. So here in Milwaukee, we have this thing that was started in a club in the early 80s that's called Spoof Fest. And the whole premise is you get together with your buddies, pick a band, and you spoof them. So the idea is to play the music as good as you can, but make fun of their history and whatnot and camp it up on stage, and so there'd be skits and whatnot involved within the show. Like each band can do like 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and it's still going on to this day. And it's super popular here. We sell out 2 nights in a row at big clubs here and whatnot. So back in the days, this early on, these friends of mine got together and they decided, let's do, Beatles meet Metallica. And they got together and wrote a few songs and recorded a cassette that they were going to give out at this Spoof Fest event. And they were like early on in the bill and played their set, threw out their cassettes and whatnot. The band wasn't called Beatallica at all. It was just, this band. I wasn't at that particular one, so I don't remember if they named it anything or. So anyways, they threw out this cassette, and there's a guy in the audience that got the cassette, uploaded it onto his website back then, which is, not very, that's in the early days too of, people having that. And he, from what I understand the story, he got 1 million downloads from his site, from that cassette.
Oh my goodness.
And people were loving it. Then the next thing he got was a cease and desist, "We're suing you" letter by Sony Records. And he freaked out. And the next thing he did was track down the singer of that and said, "Hey, this is my name, blah, blah. Yeah, I got that cassette and I uploaded it to my site and we had 1 million downloads." And at this point, this isn't a band, by the way. It was just made for a one-off thing. A year later, they're getting this call. And they're like, "What are you talking about?" And the guy's like, "Yeah, and I named it Beatallica." And here's the thing: Sony's suing me for millions of dollars. And the singer's just like, who is now the singer? He wasn't then because the band didn't exist. He's like, "What the hell are you talking about?" And he explained this, and the guy's just like, the singer's like, "What the?" So somehow or another, Rolling Stone or NPR got a hold of this story and did a story on it. And it was on NPR and whatnot. Then Rolling Stone, I don't know which came first, but there was an article in Rolling Stone about it. And they picked it up. And Lars read that article. And he tracked down the singer's home phone number and called him at home. And his wife answered, the singer's wife answered, and she wasn't a metalhead. She doesn't know any of that stuff. And it's like, "Yes, it's Lars Ulrich from Metallica. I'm looking for Michael Tierney." And she's like, honey, there's a Lars on the phone for you. And he was in the other room, and he's like, screw them. That's my friends messing with me. Just hang up. So she hangs up. Lars calls back. It's like, "This is Lars Ulrich. I want to talk to Michael about Beatallica." And she's like, "What?" And so finally he got on the phone, and he's like, "Look, quit fucking, messing with me here." This, and he's about to hang up. Lars like, "Don't hang up. He's like, and then he's, the singer is very, very, very knowledgeable about all things heavy metal, and Beatles and whatnot. But he's very, he can tell you who played on what record and blah, blah, blah. So they started talking, and Lars is like, "You know what? Fuck Sony." Excuse my French. Literally said that. And it's like, "We're going to give you our legal team for free to fight Sony. And you guys can use whatever you want from us because we think this is hilarious."
Oh,
and,
that's great.
Yeah. And so then Sony got wind of that, and they dropped the lawsuit with the caveat that they retain 100% royalties and worldwide distribution, is the story that I know. So from that, then the band got signed to a label called Oleo, which is a comedy label, but also a label that would have classic rock guys like Ray Manzarek. They released a couple of his solo records. But George Lopez is a big comedian on the record. So it's kind of this mixture of classic rock, side guys kind of, and then comedy.
Yeah.
So the band signed to them, and then the worldwide distribution was through Sony, which is fantastic because it went everywhere.
Yeah.
Around the world. And then the booking agents started calling, and 20 years later, here we are. We just signed a deal for playing a festival in Moscow coming up in May, and Montreal, and we've been all around the world as well.
Oh my goodness.
So perfect timing. So when the Femmes broke up in 2007, briefly, I was back in Milwaukee, didn't have a gig. They called me. It's like, "Hey, do you want to audition for this Beatallica?" My line, like I use with the Violent Femmes, I use with them, "You guys still around?" It's like,
right.
Fortunately, they don't say, "Screw off, we're getting somebody else." But so I auditioned for them. And the reason that happened was I was in a thrash band called 911 back in the day, in the 80s and whatnot. And we played with everybody. Like Nirvana's first show in Milwaukee on the Bleach tour was with us on a Tuesday night at a club.
Oh my goodness.
And we opened up for, Fugazi's first show was with us. It's 911 band.
Wow.
So the singer's band back then opened up for us. And he called me up, 25 years later. He's like, hey, do you still know how to thrash pick? And I'm like, yeah, of course. It's like riding a bike,
Mm-hmm.
And so I auditioned and got the gig. And now I am Gerg Hammetsson III of Beatallica, going on my 15th year with them.
That's your alter ego.
Yep, because we all have the alter ego names, which are, some of them are pretty hilarious. So,
that's great. So if Sony maintains 100% royalties, does that mean album sales? I mean, can you guys...
for the publishing.
Oh, for publishing. Okay.
Yeah. So you still get what's called mechanical, which is very little, anyways, but the publishing is where it's at. But that was their deal. And otherwise they're like, we're just going to shut you down. This can't exist. We're not giving you any rights to use Beatles in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
And unfortunately, what ended up happening with that is we released a few records on Oleo, and we were up for our option. And they said, yeah, we'll do another record. Some new president or something of Sony got wind of us somehow. We don't know. I think he got tagged in an email or whatever talking to our label. And he was like, I don't know why you guys are allowed to do this. This is an abomination on the Beatles, blah, 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 on and on. And so when we were about to record our last record with Oleo, which is called Abbey Load, it's like, they would not allow us to do our own lyrics, which we had always done, which was the whole thing. That's the part of it. It's like making fun of the metal scene and
Hey,
Beatles.
dude.
And exactly. They wouldn't allow us to do that. Their contract with us said, you can release this record, but you have to use the original lyrics and melodies. And we're like, we went all back and forth. The man's like, screw this, we're not going to do that. And I said to them, well, if we do this, then maybe we can get more opportunities for licensing for films and whatever, because it's not a weird publishing thing. Because Beatallica is it's its own entity. We've talked at like Harvard and Yale, because it's its own. We're not a parody band like Weird Al. We actually take songs that I say they smell like Beatles and Metallica, and we create our own songs out of it.
Right.
But there's some songs that we do parody. We just change the lyrics and whatnot. But anyways, that was insane, crazy stuff for publishing lawyers to deal with. And still to this day, they don't know how to do it. So anyways, I talked the band into doing this last record, just for the possibility, well, it's almost a Beatles parody, so then we can get more publishing, opportunities and whatnot. So
it sounds complicated.
Yeah. Oh yeah. On the legal side, absolutely. It's totally nuts.
Well, if you guys are looking for a lawsuit on copyright infringement of your material, you may want to look at the movie Yesterday, which used Hey Dude.
Yep.
They just ripped it right off, didn't they?
And we have a great story of that, of course.
Really?
Yes. So our video guy's his nickname's Weber, and he's involved in video he goes all over the world and whatnot. And he loved the band early on. He's done all of our videos. And so he got wind of that. He was in that trailer, and he was at the premiere in New York of that film, and he met the director. And he talked to the director. I don't know. I can't remember his name. And he was like, hey, man, that's so great that you use Beatallica reference. Hey, dude. And the director's like, who?
Oh, no.
He's like, you don't know who that is? And he's like, no. And he gave him the record. And like the guy's like, oh, my God, this is great.
Yeah.
So
secretly is like, oh, shit. I just.
And that's what he said to him. He's like, so you guys going to sue me?
Right.
So we're like, no, it's fine. I just got to laugh. But now we're on his radar. And he's like, yeah, I'll try to use you guys for some stuff. And
that's cool.
Yeah. And that's the bizarre thing about this band. We've got it's a wide range of fans all over the world. And like Dream Theater's Mike Portnoy, the drummer, he loves us. We've opened up for them. He'll play with us, like literally on the drums for a few songs. And, it's kind of bizarre. And getting back to suing, whatever, there's actually a tribute band in South America, in Brazil, of Beatallica tribute band.
Oh,
how does that work?
That's so meta. It's like, there's so many layers to this story.
That's why I'm saying it's like, go do the research. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
But it's still going, we just treat it like, whatever, it's every couple of years we'll get a call. And I think because of that movie, our website was blowing up with messages. Oh my God, you guys, I saw you with Ed Sheeran and all this.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're getting offers again to play these major festivals all over the place.
So how did Moscow happen?
They just phoned up the singer. The singer handles all that stuff, and we don't actively seek out anything. Like it's
we need to get a gig
find
in
us.
Moscow.
Yeah, exactly. They find us, and it's always some kind of metal festival or a Beatles festival. That calls us.
Yeah. Well, that should be interesting. Will that be your first time in Moscow?
Yes. Yep.
Wow.
And for the whole band, yeah.
Be careful there, man.
Oh yeah, no doubt. And the Femmes didn't get out that far as well. Like Beatallica, we got out to Hungary, was as far east as we did that, and Beatallica, and the Femmes we played Istanbul was the furthest out. So yeah, looking forward to going to Mother Russia.
Right on. So tell me how you connected with Dennis DeYoung and Uriah Heap, because I see that on your resume as well.
So the Dennis DeYoung thing happened. Violent Femmes are doing some shows in Southern California, and we never carried gear. We just called what's called renting the back line. And the back line is the amps and things like that. So we carry guitars and that's it. And the company that we hired or was hired for us to provide our amps and whatnot, the guy showed up. His name is John Oshima, lives in San Francisco. That's his company, and he happened to be at that show. And at the time, he was also tour manager for Gwen Stefani and Steve Miller and Dennis DeYoung. So, and this company is a side thing. So just by chance, he happened to be, none of his guys could make it to this gig, or he wanted to go see the Femmes or something. And so he was there with the gear, and I was the liaison to the band. Okay, because I'm still a guitar tech with the Femmes,
right?
So I met him. I'm setting up everything, and I play the show, and I tear down everything, load it back up with him, and he looks at me. He's like, "You're amazing, man." I'm like, "Well, what's up?" He's like, "I just saw you deal with all the gear and everything, and play the entire show with these guys, and then tear it down." And it's like, "Where are you based out of?" I'm like, "Milwaukee." It's like, "That's great, because I'm managing Dennis DeYoung, and I need somebody in that region for shows to do backline." I'm like, "Great, call me up." So I got that call. Did a couple of gigs with Dennis and was backstage talking to him, and he's just reminiscing about, I miss the 70s when, real guitar players had Gibson Les Pauls and Marshall Stacks, and I just love that. And now they have all these boutique-y small amps and all this. And he looks at me, he goes, "You look like a rocker. I bet you have a Les Paul and a Marshall Stack." And it's like, as a matter of fact, Dennis, that's my setup.
No way.
Yep.
Pegged
like,
you, man.
Yeah. And then I proceeded to tell him the story. It's like, one of the first songs I ever learned on my own I was really proud of was Sweet Madam Blue. He's like, "Oh, that's great." He's like, "You know what? There's a couple of songs that we play." They only had one guitar player at the time. I think they have two now, or he has two now. He's like, "You know what? Why don't you play rhythm guitar back by the Monitor Council on 4 or 5 songs?" I'm like, "I'd be honored to."
Oh, wow.
So I ended up "Come Sail Away," Sweet Madam Blue, Rockin' the Paradise, all these. Yeah. And I'm back by the Monitor Council. He's like, "You're not in the video. You're not in the pictures. Nobody knows you. So I just want you to be back by the monitors. You're not a member of the band." I'm like, "I don't care. It's fine." But every night he would come, he would run across the stage and give me the heavy metal horns, and then run back on. So here I'm this surreal moments of here I'm playing "Come Sail Away" with the guy who wrote it.
Yeah.
It's like, and Sweet Madam Blue, one of the first songs I ever figured out in my entire life.
And that's why you listed as ghost rhythm guitar, because he was hiding you back there. Huh?
Correct.
So what happened to Styx? What happened to the band?
They went through a bunch of stuff that you'd have to go and research that. I don't want to get into any of that. That was way before my thing. So.
Yeah. So, but he's obviously able to use that music and play it.
Yeah. Perform. Oh yeah. And he still performs. It's mainly regionally in the Midwest area that he does. I've noticed. But yeah, he still plays.
Yeah.
And
his voice is incredible.
Oh yeah, to this day, it's great. Yeah. Yep. And then the Uriah Heap thing is kind of funny as well. So way back when I had the 4-track recording things, I worked at a local records store that was called Mainstream. It was the big chain here in Wisconsin, Mainstream Records. And one of the young kids that worked there, he asked me one night, "Hey, I got this song. Can you record it for me?" And so we went back I was living still at home at the time, and went to my bedroom that I had turned into a recording studio with quotation marks, and recorded his song. And I played slide guitar on this particular song that this kid had written. Fast forward 20 years later or something, he's the production manager for a big casino here called Potawatomi Casino that has major acts all the time, like casinos do.
Mm-hmm.
So they booked Uriah Heap for 2 nights. They were going to perform the Demons and Wizards record in its entirety for the first time, at least in the U.S. And he called me up. He's like, "Hey, you still play slide guitar?" I'm like, "Absolutely." He's like, "Well, because I have an artist that needs that for a few songs for their show." I'm like, "Okay, great. Who is it?" And he's like, "Uriah Heap. Do you know who that is?" I'm like, "Yeah." And here's how I know it. I was a big fan and still am in the 70s. And I saw Uriah Heap open up for Kiss in 1977.
Oh my goodness.
Which means my very first concert that I've ever seen was Uriah Heap, the first band. So,
it's like full circle, man.
It's totally bizarre. And then this kid, I remembered that I played slide guitar and called me, and I walk into this thing, okay, show up for rehearsal. I walk in and they're all this, get introduced, and I'm like, hey, the bass player, unfortunately, he passed from cancer shortly after. His name is Trevor Boulder, who happened to be the bass player of Ziggy Stardust, David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust band, amongst other bands. And so I'm just, wow, this is crazy, like totally surreal for me, And we ended up jamming, Mick Box, who's the original member. It's like, let's jam blues and E. So we jammed for about 10 minutes. And after we got done, he's like, "It looks like we got our man." And played the shows, and that was great. And, hung out with those guys. I told Mick that story. He's like, "Mick, I got to tell you this story. So you're the first band I ever saw in my life, and now I'm playing with you." He's like, "Good on you, mate. That's great."
Oh, were you rocking the National slide guitar?
No, it's actual electric slide.
Oh, okay.
So just, standard. And they loved it. They had me come up on a couple more songs and played a couple dates with them. And we're friends to this day. So
that's so badass. Yeah.
Just bizarre.
I'm looking at all these venues that you've performed at, and talk about iconic, your Red Rocks in Denver, Coachella main stage in Indio, Fillmore, San Francisco. Yeah. I mean, the Greek. Out of all of these venues that you've been on stage looking out at the crowd and doing what you love, which one really stands out as your favorite, and why?
Well, the Fillmore was just because of even though that wasn't, the back in the day, Jimi Hendrix Fillmore or whatever, it's just, that iconic name. And just, all of them really, but that one for me, because I just loved all this. I grew up in the 60s and early 70s bands and all that,
Mm-hmm.
And you always hear live at the Fillmore, and, they're playing the Fillmore, and, so that one was a big one for me.
Yeah.
And then, but, Sydney Opera House, obviously, it's like, okay. And that's, the Femmes, they got booked into all those places because that's once again, the kind of the bizarre side of them. They can play punk rock clubs and then go and play these iconic venues as well,
Yeah. What about the Central Park stage, New York City?
That was super cool. It's not the one if you're thinking the Paul Simon, they're legendary. They have this, series that they do every summer. And that was cool. But unfortunately for us, we got rained out. So within like 1 or 2 songs. And then, so
but just being there in Central Park, New York City.
And playing, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's got to be amazing.
But what was great about that was the makeup show. We played an iconic venue that closed shortly after that had been around since the 70s as well.
Nice.
But so that was super cool. The makeup show was like 5 months later or something in winter.
So what do you do when you're not playing in bands and performing and recording albums?
Extracurricular activities. My father gave me a present of scuba diving lessons. Shortly after that time, I told you about when Femmes played there, and I reconnected with him. So
in Australia?
Yeah. Yep. So I got my certification in the Great Barrier Reef, and I love it. It was incredible. I wish I had done it 20 some years earlier. But that's my favorite thing.
Right on.
Because everything else I'm doing, I'm playing bands and whatnot. It's all consuming.
Yeah.
So,
sounds like everything else is completely audio or music related.
Yep, correct.
Yeah.
Which I love to do. It's super fun to me.
That's awesome.
Any things like that scuba diving hands down is my favorite activity.
Yeah. So is your next gig with Beatallica on tour?
I've have a trio, a few buddies of mine that we've been around for quite a long time, just getting together, singing songs. We're doing something this Thursday for a holiday party that we do every year. Beatallica just played Milwaukee this past Friday. I just played a show with my tribute band, Then Lizzy, which is a Thin Lizzy tribute band, which is super fun. So yeah, the next gig coming up is that. Then I have a solo show, my first ever solo show coming up here in Milwaukee at a place called the County Clare, small Irish bar.
Nice.
Yeah, that's terrifying me, really, because I'm not a singer troubadour guy,
Yeah. But you're used to being shoved behind the speakers by Dennis DeYoung.
Exactly. I'm a great backing guy, right. but they call me, they keep persisting. I'm like, all right, damn it, I got to do this.
Yeah.
So that's the one that I'm really like freaking out about, in this small pub, basically, and I'm more nervous about that than any other thing I've ever done. What are you going to play? I have several original songs that nobody's ever heard, and so I'm going to do that. And I decided to break it down into the different instruments. Play a few songs on mandolin, play a few songs on guitar, etc. It's only like an hour. They only want me to do like an hour, so
right.
So I'm going to break it down and then tell some stories. Do that whole thing. So
nice. We've got a lot of great stories.
Yeah, super fun. And then the big shows coming up are in around May. We're playing Montreal and Moscow and some Midwest dates with Beatallica, and which I'm sure by that time there'll be more dates added to all of that stuff. So,
well, that's super exciting. Yeah. So where can people find you online? I see hamtoneaudio.com is your website with your bio, and it looks like you have some show dates on there and a good resource for people if they want to see you in Milwaukee. Any other social media places they can go check you out?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, Hamtone Audio, and Facebook under my name, Jeff Hamilton. And then obviously Beatallica has their own pages and whatnot. So, and yeah.
Great.
And I will update my site. I haven't done that actually in a while. So the beginning of summer. So.
For my listeners, I recommend going to that site because there's a lot of really cool pictures of Jeff jamming out with all kinds of iconic bands and musicians, and his bio is really impressive. So go check him out, hamtoneaudio.com. And if you have a chance to see him live, looks like there's lots of opportunities in Milwaukee. And if you want to make the trip, in Moscow and Montreal in May.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention a new project that I'm involved in through me doing some production. It's called Ice Island. And there's a duo in the Midwest here called Codebreaker that's fairly popular all over amongst DJs and whatnot for like electronic music and that kind of thing, and synth pop. And I was, got called by the singer to produce his new project, which is called Ice Island. And I ended up playing bass and guitar on it. And that's the next thing I'm going to be involved in as well, as far as a new feather in the hat, another band. So, and he created a Spotify account. I don't know if he put up any of the music yet, but that's all in the works. But Ice Island is something to check out as well.
Ice Island. Check it out, listeners. And sounds like no shortage of projects for you to be involved in.
Yeah, and this is completely, left field. It's like synthesizer pop stuff, it's things I've never done, so, but super fun. So
very cool. Thanks a lot, Jeff, for being on the show.
Thanks, Brian. It's a blast.
Hey, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Dreampath podcast. If so, I have a favor to ask. Can you go to your favorite podcast service and give me a rating and review? Your feedback is what keeps this podcast going. I appreciate your time, and as always, go find your dream path.